All right, all right, all right. Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Forum. As you know, I'm your host, Renee Pinnell, founder of Kaleidoscope, a professional network for the immersive industry. And today on the show, we've got my buddy, Jesse. Jesse has done a lot of different things, but you probably know him as a writer, as a thinker, as someone who is in the space having opinions and thoughts about things. And you can see those opinions and thoughts on VRScout, on Forbes. Where else do you publish?
Lots of different places as the need arises, but VRScout and Forbes are the two anchors.
So that's my super broad, generic, kind of crappy introduction. I think of you as you and Kent are kind of like the philosopher kings in our industry. You do really cool things. Like you curate, AR, VR art programs. I don't know. I feel like you're one of those deep thinkers. So I'm excited to go deep with you today. We had Kent on I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago. And it was my favorite interview up to that point because, man, that guy goes trippy places, and I like going there with him.
He's the mage. He's the mage.
Yeah.
I'm just a peasant by comparison.
He's crazy smart, and he's a wizard. So why don't you give us a quick rundown on how you would describe yourself and sort of give people the context for who you are and what you do?
Sure. So as you kind of said, I wear a few different hats. So first, the journalism side, I'm an editor-at-large of VRScout, and I'm a Forbes contributor. So those are the two kind of main homes. But I've published with The Verge and Billboard and Adweek and a few other different places as I see things that fit there. Another sort of hat is the founder hat. I founded a screenwriting and project management tool for immersive stories called Galatea.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that, but I'm going to talk about it now. But keep going.
Yeah. It's in the freezer right now. We're getting there slowly but surely. These startups in this industry are tough. So what's cool is that it's given me a front row seat to understanding how difficult it is to launch a startup and to witness all of your own failures firsthand.
It's very hard.
Yeah, and you've managed to do it quite successfully, actually. So hat to you. Many have gone the way of reorging and remapping what their life looks like.
Yeah, it's sad but true.
Yeah. So where that's all kind of piped now is I'm the deputy director of emerging technology at Southern New Hampshire University. So basically working in their innovation center, advising them on the different types of emerging technology that might work in the sort of framework of higher education. So that's a lot of immersive VR, AR, but also artificial intelligence and blockchain, and just kind of using that.
You live in New Hampshire then?
I do.
Oh, no shit. When did you move there?
A few months ago. I started earlier in the summer.
All right, badass. Well, this is a new thing. Are you from New Hampshire?
No, actually, I'd never really spent much time other than Boston and New York in the Northeast at all. So it's been totally new, and I'm excited for the coming fall, and I'm a little bit nervous about the coming winter after 6 years in California.
You're in for a treat. New Hampshire is beautiful. I mean, I always thought of the East Coast as this sort of overdeveloped, not natural place. But New Hampshire is beautiful. It's just gorgeous nature. I think there's like 2 million people in the entire state.
I don't even think it's that many.
Yeah, it's very small. We've got a lot of family in New Hampshire.
Nice.
Great-grandfather was an acrobat in vaudeville, and a lot of the people in vaudeville, when vaudeville sort of fell apart in the 30s, 40s with film hitting the scene, and a lot of people retired from that industry in New Hampshire. And so there's this little community in Sutton of all these wild, amazing performers and actors that got cabins and went to nature. And my great-grandfather was a part of that. And there's a lot of our family that's still in Sutton, New Hampshire.
That is an amazing story. That needs to be a documentary.
Yeah. I tried to make it as a kid. That was actually one of my first films. I was always fascinated by family history, just in general. I think it's, the story of how you got to where you are. I think everyone has an interesting family history.
Totally.
But this is probably not interesting to anyone but me and maybe you. So let's bring it back to the VR and AR stuff. That's
Indeed.
what people want. So, okay. So, I've got a good sense of what you're doing now. I think everyone on the line probably does too. Well, let's talk about, so we met back in 2015, 2016 at Sundance, I think.
Sundance, yeah.
So was that sort of the season of you getting into this industry, or had you already been in the industry? And what was that moment where you're like, oh, this is a thing I want to commit myself to?
Yeah, it was the season of me really kind of like stepping out and contributing. I had actually been introduced to VR very early relative to this wave. I had tried Mike Murdoch's DK1 the very first week of 2014.
Oh, nice.
So it was actually like before, it was right as Hollywood was really kind of putting its eyes on VR. And at the time, I had moved out to LA to pursue a career in screenwriting. And so my thinking was, well, VR is something that I'll contribute in as a creative. And while in LA and while trying to kind of like make a life in LA, I started working as a copywriter for movie trailers and TV spots. And in the meantime, was working on feature 2D feature scripts with a friend who went on to found a company called Silver Screen Productions, which was the first third-party vendor that Oculus Story Studio worked with.
Oh, interesting.
And they actually just launched. Definitely highly recommended to anybody who has a Go or a Quest. Definitely go check out Welcome to the Family. Really great sort of play with storytelling. But anyway, when he had first done that, he had sort of asked me for scripts, like, just send me scripts because I don't know what we will or won't create. And in the course of doing that, I realized how irritating it was to try to write immersive scripts in Final Draft. And
Yeah.
Final Draft is a great tool for 2D, but it's not, at the time, it wasn't a great tool for 360. And I was just wanting to write 360 video. I wasn't even getting into interactive yet.
Yeah.
And so that's where the germ for Galatea came. And Galatea and journalism kind of went hand in hand in this industry for me, because I'd worked as a journalist off and on for a decade. Since high school, I was contributing articles about my high school, and I was editor at the campus paper in college. And so it was always a thread of my life, but it was never like my one thing. And so as I started really wanting to kind of become part of the industry in a more dedicated way, I started going to more meetups, and I started covering the space at
So what year
the
are we
time.
in? Are we in like 2015 now? Because that was sort of
This is 2015 into 2016 was when it all kind of like kicked into high gear. So I kind of like sat on the sidelines for like 18 months, and I just like tried a lot of content. I would like look at builds that people were building in Southern California, and that was a lot of fun. But I didn't, like I said, at the time, I thought, well, I'll just write content when it's top level priority for me. But yeah, it was that process of wanting to actually try to write scripts and realizing how kind of irritating that process was. And then I started publishing about it on HuffPost through a series of just sort of like a long winding series of events. Met the amazing folks at VRScout. We decided to get into a more formal arrangement, and then that was Sundance, and I met you at Sundance that year.
Yeah, that was a fun dinner. That was like the first time I connected with Eric too, who's one of the founders of VRScout. How are they doing? I haven't talked to Eric in I don't know, feels like a long time. What's going on there?
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things, some of which I can't chat about, but presumably you'll be hearing about soon. I can say that VRScout has for a long time had a really dedicated interest in mixed reality video. So
yep, they do great jobs with videos that get like, it always boggles me. Like I try to have a good social media presence and try to do, weird things like I'm doing right now. And then like VRScout like publishes a video and it'll get like, I don't know, 1 million views. And I'm like, how does that, I can't, what? Like, I don't know. They're really good at that.
Jonathan in particular is a mad wizard when it comes to kind of knowing how to frame visual content in a way that people will really receive it well. Like he became an Instagram influencer years before that was a thing. Like in 2012, he was one of the top 10. Or I'm maybe getting the numbers wrong, but he was one of the most notable Instagram influencers of like 2012. And he has no formal, as far as I know, no formal photography training. He just kind of got it in his head to try this thing and did. And so that kind of carries through. And he really keeps an eye on what's going on. Like I remember he got really into Musical.ly really, really early on and wanted to do mixed reality, toying around with Musical.ly. And then of course we saw where that went with TikTok. So like,
Yeah.
He's got that brain. His brain's kind of wired to do that.
And this, Jonathan is the other co-founder for the people
He's
online
the
that
other
don't
founder.
know. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
Eric and Jonathan. So okay, so you started attending these meetups. You started a formal relationship with VRScout, publishing it. One of the things that I like to talk about with folks that were in that sort of first wave of the new wave is capturing the emotional zeitgeist of that time. It was really like 2015, 2016, basically the lead up to consumer launch was a really exciting time. It was the part of the hype cycle that I liked. It was that sort of like building momentum, energy. Everyone was going to every event. Everyone had this sense of possibility in the air. But I don't want to color it too much. What was that time like for you?
No, I mean, you really nailed it. Like, I think because at that time it still felt, we didn't even know exactly what it was and what we could do with it. So we were kind of like spilling over and buzzing over. And then people outside were coming to ask us, and we were like, we don't know anything, and there was all this sort of really grand talk that I think we saw come in these different waves in the 80s and 90s, where people just start really going philosophical and really going kind of far out with it. And what's been nice is the way in which some of that has remained, but we've kind of reeled it in a little bit based on the actual technologies that we have and understanding when we'll have what technologies. I think at that time, what I remember is it was just like, I think our sense of how quickly things were going to come was monumental. And so like some of that led to some of the casualties, like all the studios that sprung up in Hollywood thinking it was going to be like the next wave of Hollywood, and that it would be kind of, they had stars in their eyes. Yeah. And of course, like there didn't end up being that.
Well, and part of it was just like, I mean, if you think back to that, the DK1 and then the DK2 and then the CV1, that was insanely fast turnaround. Like the time between when the DK1 launched and the DK2 launched was like 6 months. They pushed like 2 products in 1 year, and the quality difference between those two is so astonishing that you sort of like, well, every 6 months they're gonna like triple the quality. And I think that was part of why people felt, and I know that's why I felt this huge sense of acceleration and optimism that like, oh, it's just around the corner. In some ways it is. I mean, it's been such a short period of time, really, from 2013-14 to 2019 with the Quest. And I think when I first got on the industry, the Quest like has on paper, that is the headset that I've been waiting for. Got to get rid of the wires. It's got to be stick off. Got to have hand and head tracking. It's got to be pretty affordable. Like across the board, it's basically right on the other side of the line for all those things. It's pretty fucking fast on one hand, but still not fast enough.
Well, I think what happened is we got conditioned, like, everybody kind of references, like, a lot of people have bandied about the Quest as the iPhone moment for VR, but I think like that framework is both helpful and really toxic, because the iPhone was like 20 years into mobile computing and cell technology coming in and converging. But when you go and look back at Newton and the time scale that it took to get from Newton to iPhone, then when you look at what we're doing, it's pretty staggering. But we were kind of thinking like, oh, well, iPhone was 2007 and the culture on the iPhone propped up within like 2009, 2010. So we were expecting like that, but it doesn't. There's all this sort of background that needs to kind of get built out. And I think also it's been really good that we had this kind of winter, because we have to establish kind of the cultural norms around, like, I remember early on, I'm sure you saw this tons in the early Kaleidoscope runs, I remember there was no real kind of politeness metric around like taking pictures of people that you didn't know in VR. You know what I mean? It was just rampant. And now a lot more people know, like, oh, that's kind of like a dick move, or like touching people while they're in VR. I remember early on, people think it was hilarious to go mess with you while you're in VR. And it's like, oh, we realized like that's a pretty jerky thing to do.
Yeah.
And so we need to like those little basic things.
Totally. Yeah. And it's, I mean, and I do feel like at least I'm feeling like I've got solid ground under my feet for the first time. Whereas before it was always based in hypotheticals and, potential. Whereas now it's like, oh, okay. I sort of know the size and shape of this. And from a business perspective too, it's like we're getting to a place where there is an addressable audience. In terms of, I mean, it's different for each different company, but like there's enough headsets out in the wild that you can make an experience and you can make money in. And I think Beat Saber, I talk about this every single time, but that's like, it's like the Quest, Beat Saber, like these are really, really big moments. Like the first time you have a small team from an unlikely place produce a piece of content that's fucking amazing. And, they've in terms of download numbers, they've made north of, 20 million, probably, with all the additional deals they have, it's probably 30 million.
I was going to
plus.
say they had made that much money before Quest, actually. Like, so.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Cause
so
they broke 1 million downloads before they were on Quest, I think. I think they got there in like 6 months. So I mean, the fact that that's possible, I mean, it's an outlier, sure, but the fact that you have a breakout piece of content that's so good that I know a lot of people go out and buy a headset just to play it. There's got to be 100 more of those, right? There's got to be 1,000 more of those. That can't be a fluke. It's not like Beat Saber is the only thing you can do in VR that's going to have that kind of appeal. There's tons of other things that we just haven't thought of yet. Okay, we got a question from Alan. Would you be able to highlight the process of steps for a VR production from script to the headset for consumption? Yeah, go for it.
Let me, one final note on Beat Saber that I wanted to shout out to everybody is, I don't know if everybody saw this yesterday, but the other amazing thing about Beat Saber is the UGC community that it propped up. Or, I mean, it didn't prop it up, but like that propped up around it. Yeah. And yesterday there was this video of this guy doing he had modded a beat map that moved on the x-axis 60 meters. So in addition to the different blocks coming at you, he was also running sideways, left and right.
Oh, that's awesome! I missed that
in a park. Yeah. So
in like a big space.
In a big space,
dude.
Or just an open park. And so that was really exciting to see.
Oh no, I love the mod community is fantastic. Like all the different crazy levels, like the people that have made staffs instead of the
the Darth Maul. Yeah.
It's just amazing. It's just amazing. Yeah. I can't say enough great things about Beat Saber. So cool. So
yes,
give us the rundown on production. How do you make a VR project?
What I'm gonna do is I'll put this in the chat, but I want to kind of point to a couple things that if you want to dig deeper, because I don't want to spend I could talk about this for a very long time. So I want to share a few things just kind of via screen share and then talk kind of through that. So
okay, badass.
So I'll actually copy this now so I can share it later. But so last year, the XR Alliance did a screenwriting competition, and as part of that, asked me to share resources about that, about how to do that, and sort of storytelling in general. So all of these are things that I shared, and they're all pieces of things that I've written. Well, these 4 are things that I've written, and this is something that you should just check out. Part of that is I actually everybody has their different method, and in building Galatea, I talked to just tons and tons and tons of creators, ranging from video games to immersive theater, but obviously lots of digital immersive creators. And one thing that I found, and the reason that it grew from a screenwriting tool to a screenwriting and project management tool, is one of the biggest problems is actually the breakdown in communication between the technical people and the creative people. And so if you can create a workflow that everybody kind of gets on board with and is able to communicate back and forth across, because pre-production is now so integrated in a way that in film it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Yeah.
That's really important. So that's why I kind of broke it up into your script and then your story archive. And this story archive document is actually just a template on Google Drive.
Are we looking at your product right now, by the way? What interface are we in?
I'll show the product. This is an ad hoc Google Sheets creation that I made as sort of a way to replicate some of the functionality of Galatea, which I'll show that.
Google Docs look black and badass like this? Wow.
Wait, do you see the word Arthur right now?
I see story archive. It's all black and it looks cool.
Oh, interesting. No. So I clicked a new link. I guess I need to change it. So this is the XR Alliance page. So no, unfortunately. So this has basic kind of like conceptual resources as well as some actual other links that as I said I wrote and other people.
And you'll throw that URL into the chat log for folks.
Yes, and within that, let me jump back and share the new. How do I stop sharing you? And then I will share this.
Yeah, I think you can share a specific screen, so you're not showing everything, or you can share your whole desktop, so you share wherever
Got
you're
it. I
bouncing
was
around.
thinking, so I clicked a link within the page and I was hoping it would just jump to sharing that. So this is like an example of a story archive that actually helps the workflow get really, really streamlined if you're working with a developer team, or for
Cool,
that
cool.
matter, with producers and editors and people that will be dealing with footage. So I call it a story archive because it's basically like taking some of the aspects of like a show Bible when we're talking about TV,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
allows you to break that down in a way that will help with the people that are dealing with money, finding locations, like all the things we kind of like assign to producers. It'll help with them, but it also helps with everybody who's eventually going to be building and creating, set designers, your character artists, like all that. So the things you want to specify that I kind of broke down in this story archive are the really basic things. You just want to let somebody know, like, effectively what platform is this going to be on without calling out any specific platform.
Nice.
And then you want to be able to break down your characters and talk about if it's a game, what type of specific mechanics do they have, but also the kind of more conceptual stuff around who they are and what motivates them. Same thing with locations. And again, you want to be able to have pictures and objects. So like hot props, anything that's going to be an interactable device, and mechanics, any type of feature, or we use mechanics really broadly in my framework in Galatea because it means something different across a bunch of different types of games. Essentially, any definition you can have for a mechanic, we want you to feel free to use it that way.
Like flame hands.
Like flame hands,
Everyone's got
exactly.
to have
So
flame hands.
yeah, you want to be able to have flame hands, and so it's like summary, what is it, how is it activated, basic stuff, and then associations, like can it only be used in certain contexts, certain characters, whatever. So this is a really simple thing, but what it allows you to do is once you've done this, in your script, when you've gone actually, and I can show you this later, but I don't, presumably everybody knows this, but I can take this link and hyperlink it into my script when that character comes up. So say Arthur's here, I can hyperlink this link over Arthur's name. So if somebody's like, wait, who's Arthur again? I'm kind of getting lost in this massive world. They can
Yeah.
refer back to this link and it'll immediately
Nice.
take you there. So same with location, same with mechanics, all this stuff that's there, you'll actually be able to reference. And that grew from, I'll stop sharing this screen now. And go to what Galatea looked like so that it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, yeah. I've actually, I mean, on Kaleidoscope side, we are pretty laser focused on helping artists raise money for their projects. So we're normally early on in the life cycle, so we help a lot with packaging projects and pitching projects. But once the project has money, like we say goodbye and you go make the thing. So this is actually really interesting to see this process and to look at your product that you're about to show us, because I've never seen it before.
Cool.
And it seems pretty cool.
Cool. All right. Go back to the start. So the way it would work on are you seeing this?
I am, yeah. It's like for some reason I'm not able to make it full screen right now, but we can see it. It's the three of us, you, me, and your other screen.
Got it. Well, okay. Hopefully it's if anything's unclear, just ask me and I'll
I can see it. I think it's clear.
All right. So basically, like, you would come in, the framework of Galatea, we wanted it to have what we really liked about Google Drive is we want to be able to have this entirely linkable asset universe for your story. And we want it to be something that anybody can drop in on. This is being shown on Envision, like something like Envision. Anybody can drop in on different levels of, whether they can edit, whether they can read only, things like that. So in this case, we've templatized certain things, because another insight that we got to in talking was that while developers are super keen to learn new languages, and it feels really kind of rewarding and sleuthy for them to like teach themselves a new piece of software, creatives hate it. Creatives hate having to learn software in the first place, and they pretty much stick to what works for them, which is, for instance, why people still use Avid, even though they're way better editing tools in the world. So in this case, we would say, all right, well, I want the virtual reality template. So this gives you a sense of like what the different locations, characters. Every story-based experience is going to have these. So in VR, we'll prop it up that way. You can always kill these different columns or rename them, but we want to, again, like really handhold you through the process, and that way you don't feel kind of like left in a lurch. And as you get more fluency, then you can start to kind of hack the program to your needs. So get through this kind of like login sequence, and then we'll say this person's making an interactive piece, so they've added mechanics. So the way it would work is you would say, all right, I want to add a location to my world. And then you can build out this whole card for what that location is. And within that location, you can specify sublocations. So we kind of use Star Wars as a reference point just because we assume that'll be one of the highest sort of highest touch things, reference point that people will get. And with this, we also leave space for mechanics available in that world. So we're starting to link all these different things, all these characters, all these mechanics. And it's something that as you've built out these worlds, it will, like Facebook, kind of auto suggest, like when it sees the name Darth Vader, it'll auto suggest that you link to Darth Vader. And that way, if somebody's reading this card, they can be like, wait, who's Darth Vader? So
what an interesting way to put together a script. Is anyone else doing this? I mean, like, what's it called? Not Final Draft, right? They don't do any of this stuff, do they?
I think Final Draft, as far as I understand, has launched a tool to address like basically how to do 360 scripts. I haven't used it yet. I know that's something that Yvette Vargas would be a really good resource for talking about, because she's done a lot of workflows with it and is an accomplished screenwriter in her own right. And then on the so there's the film side, and then on the other end is, if anybody ever used Keltex or Celtex, depending on how you pronounce things, which really kind of what their big contribution to the field was they really pinned down collaborative screenwriting. They launched something called Keltex Gem, which is a very very, very, very robust game writing software that also applies to VR, and provides a lot of functionality that for a lot of the middle ground purposes that we were creating for are a little bit extraneous, but also seems like a really good tool in its own right. And both of those I think are available. I haven't checked in a minute.
Well, just thinking of like script writing as story building, right? Like having all of this data linked to each other and having it be almost like this website. It's almost like it's almost like building like a wiki page as opposed to a traditional script, which is really smart. I mean, again, maybe that's a thing that other people are doing, but just looking at your stuff, that is cool. I like that.
Cool. And just to be clear, one thing we'll get to is actually the idea is that we will then have a traditional screenwriting workflow, but now all that data will auto-populate, and we'll sort of get to more of that in a minute.
That's cool, man. I dig that.
So then with something like characters, same thing, but now you can add images. And what we had been working on, and obviously we'll continue to work on when it picks up steam again, is basically integrating any type of 3D creation pipeline, output pipeline that exists. So the obvious example being Sketchfab. Integrate the Sketchfab API, and then what can happen is, while you're working on the narrative or whatever it is that you're working on from the pre-production standpoint, your developers can already start working on it based on all the information they have here, and you can be leaving feedback in media res, rather than what traditionally happens in film is you write the scripts and then they go kind of make things, and it's this very segmented process, whereas here it's like you're working in tandem with each other to realize
it almost becomes project management software then.
Exactly. That's why we added the project manager. All of this came from conversations with creators. Like, our original idea was just the script part, and it was talking to creators and them saying like, yeah, the script is annoying, but ultimately like we have kind of solved the problem for ourselves in these like ad hoc solutions. The part that a lot of people hadn't solved is, well, how do we kind of like streamline this pipeline, figure out who's doing what, and figure out how to get feedback for each other, and kind of like learn to speak the same language. So just a final follow-up to this piece, and then I'll kind of move to the script part. One thing that we also allow is for you to drop the card down, so you don't have to go into the whole card if you want to just kind of look at things in macro, and then you have like kind of a one-line descriptor, And say in that descriptor you see Obi-Wan, you're like, wait, who's Obi-Wan again? And then you can have this little pop of like, oh, that's Obi-Wan. You can then jump to the full details if you want, or you can be like, wait, got it, don't need it
Yeah.
anymore.
Cool. Wow.
So
That's
then
great.
going to the script, we wanted to be able to create a framework where however you wanted to use it, you could. So some people want to stick to the, vertical linear framework that we're used to, but just have that sort of data backend and that ability to kind of see different characters and stuff like that. The other core thing we wanted to add was whenever there was some kind of interaction. So in this case, say you're playing C3PO, or you're a character that can kind of follow C3PO, follow R2D2, or pick up your blaster. Then we've opened up this framework for you to, whichever one of these you click, that's what appears below you in the script. So you're
interesting. So it's like it allows for branching narrative or branching
exactly
storylines in a game. That's cool. Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I've always wondered how people like Samantha Gorman at Tender Claws, like virtual reality that has these crazy. I mean, I just assumed that she went insane writing that. I don't even know how you would do that.
I mean, it's a good thing she's as smart as she is, because I mean, they've started doing talks actually on their pipelines, and it's really, really wild what they've built and how they do their work. In fact, there's probably video actually of that from IDS. If I can find that, I'll link that in.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, so we wanted to build that in, but what we realized was that all these kind of like webs, like there's a tool called Twine that a lot of people use for interaction for branching narratives. But what happens is you get really lost, particularly if you're a producer who's like, I'm on the clock, I have 5 minutes to read this and see what's going on. So we just wanted to make it so that whatever you clicked is what you see below you, the way you see it when you're normally reading. And that allows you to keyframe different routes. So if you just want your one friend to read one route and not get lost in everything, you can actually keyframe out interaction by interaction which route with this little button. So that as you go down, you're just reading the one script as if that's the one thing. And this is how you would kind of add that, as you'd say like, okay, I want to add another thing as a create split. Now it's there. The other thing that we wanted to basically allow people to do is write two different perspectives. We chose front, right, back, left, again, to templatize this to make it really easy for creators. But you could make this as much, you can just add as many as you want. So it could be 0 degrees, 15 degrees, 22 degrees, 30 degrees if you want. Our thinking was you probably don't even really need this level of specificity, but we want to be able to show it. So, you can hop over here to the right, kind of see it over there. And then you can do this show all thing where you're like, okay, here's what's happening in my front view. Here's what's happening in my right view. And then, okay, let's see, I need to write out what all these different things and be able to see them all in frame so that what's happening all around the POV of the character. And then the problem that creates is that different parts of the script involve different amounts of words and writing. So we created the time linking feature so that you basically put this little clock in these different parts so that you can see, oh, okay, this is where all of this is happening. Even if this has a ton of prose, this just has dialogue and whatever else.
As a designer, this makes my head hurt. This must have been so hard to put together.
We had a really, really excellent designer that we worked with named Kevin Gunther, who lives in, I believe, Winnipeg. He lives in Canada. But he was a really, really talented designer. And it was more than just like, we hired this guy and he made a product for us. It's like he was on the ground with us, really helping us solve some of these problems that.
So where are you now? I mean, what I'm looking at is an interactive mock-up. So like, how far are you in this product being a real thing? Because it looks awesome, and I want people to use it.
I do too. And actually, a friend of yours and mine as well, Jake Sally, has been a big advocate of trying to get it done as well. Basically, we ran into a very classic startup problem, which was that we ran out of money and we didn't have a customer base yet. And so both of us kind of branched off and got different jobs to be able to not be in credit card debt. That's why I say it's in the freezer, is that it's just like.
And who's both of us? Just to interject, I didn't know you had a co-founder.
Oh, my co-founder's name is Zach. He, as I said, he's working at a different company now, but he was the CTO. So he had built out. We have a lot of basically Git repos of translating this design into an actual functioning, product. And so we're I would say probably 75% of the way to having like a V1 kind of like MVP, but I am not technical at all, and so the point we're at is basically like, I'm really open to exploring with different people. If there are developers who see this and think like, oh, I could totally build this, I'd kind of happily have that conversation. If there are, the problem I was facing is that investors were like, hey, this is a great idea. Like, go give us some numbers, like give us metrics,
Yeah.
show us, traction with customers. And in absence of a product, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't blame them, actually. I totally understand why they feel that way. And then the other thing is, the industry was young enough that we couldn't really court enough early customers to kind of like pay for this stuff in advance, because up until Quest and even now, content is a really risky game. And so paying the kind of money, to have like a 5-year license, let's say, which is the kind of thing that could help us,
Yeah, you need to be targeting large studios, and the big studios haven't jumped in.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
my attitude is, when the time's right, I'm very open. I'm very open to conversations coming to me. I'm very open to exploring conversations when they spring up. It's certainly, we're still a company. I still have, I still pay taxes on the damn thing. So,
oh, isn't that awful? I had a couple of companies that just sort of sat there, and you're like, why? I know. Why is this costing me money to have a piece of paper that says I own a thing?
I know.
Governments. What do they do besides nothing ever? So sick of governments. Can we just all go live at Burning Man? I've never even been to Burning Man, but seems like the only viable alternative. Like whenever you're talking to somebody, it's like, yeah, it's just be like at Burning Man. Okay, cool. So you've been. I mean, that was really great. I really appreciate you sharing that product with me. If anybody's on the line and you're a coder or a programmer, this resonates with you, Jesse, how do they get in touch with you? Like, how do they have that conversation?
Yeah, I'll type my email address in here. It's just Jesse at VRScout. It's actually very easy.
Okay, cool. And then I feel like let's just put a bow on it with Alan in terms of, because we had this great tangent that I'm glad we went down. But in terms of the general process of producing a project, yeah, I mean, you start from a script or some kind of document that's going to outline what the narrative is, what the action points are. You got to get a team together. Before that, typically it starts with the idea. You package it into, a pitch deck. You try to go raise money. You get enough to make it. You hire some developers. Maybe you do a festival run, and then you put it in the Oculus store or the Steam store, and then you're done. And that's a super simplified version of it.
If only it just worked that easily.
Yeah. I mean, it takes forever. I mean, the projects that we work on, we've built this platform that is focused on connecting artists with industry with the purpose of funding projects and getting them off the ground. But we executive produce a handful of projects as well that we're intimately involved with that process. And I'm always shocked at how long it takes. I think people really underestimate how long it takes. This Spheres project, it took us a year and a half to raise the money for that project. A couple of years to make it and get it out into the world, and it's still sort of, it's still being distributed places. Battlescar, we first started talking to Nico and Martin back in 2015, I think, and it just had its premiere of all 3 episodes at Venice, and we'll be doing a big LA premiere next year, and then probably doing a consumer launch like end of year next year. And it's like these projects, they're like many years. You just don't realize it. And I think it's so important to have that appreciation, because you got to love the thing. So whenever you're thinking about working on a project, like plan to spend at least 5 years on it if it's successful. So you got to love it that much.
And I think people underestimate. I think a lot of people coming from like film, which even film takes a long time, but because it's been made so much easier to like hack an indie really quickly on tight timeframes, there's this sense that it's like, I hear you that it'll take a long time, but like I'll find a way to make it go quickly. And just like uniformly, the answer is no, you will not.
VR is an expensive medium. It's an expensive, complicated medium to work in, especially if you're going to do anything of quality. So I want to shift gears a bit, because you do so many things. I want to talk about those cool VR art shows that you've been curating. and what your sort of opinion is of the VR art landscape and how it fits into the broader industry.
Yeah. So the background is I curate and sometimes produce. I mean, producing is so much work. So obviously curation's a fun part. Immersive and new media art shows. The first really big one I did was in Los Angeles last year. It was a show called Spatial Reality, and it was at the time, I guess I don't know if anybody's kind of like topped the mantle, but it was the sort of largest, most comprehensive survey of VR and AR art. There were 30 different artists. It ran for a month. And so that was a doozy, but really worth it in the sense that I got to learn a lot about what the appetite for immersive art is, and also just the complications in hosting these shows. I think what's nice is because art sits in this space that people never exactly know what to do with it, even artists, we're more open to go give an art show a try than we are a movie that we think we're going to dislike, or for that matter, narrative XR content where it's like, yeah, that sounds cool. Like, for instance, like Spheres, both Spheres and Battlescar are incredible pieces of content. If you were to describe them, a lot of people, their frameworks are for film. And so they might think like, yeah, I kind of get what a black hole is, or like, yeah, I kind of get stuff about space. So they have more reasons, they have more ability to kind of check things off. Whereas if you're like, it's an art show and nobody knows exactly what the hell this stuff is, then people are like, okay, maybe I'll spend my Saturday afternoon doing that, you know?
Yeah.
And I didn't fully appreciate that the kind of openness and experimental aspect of it was a big draw for people. And so that show ended up seeing 2,400 people through the doors, which felt, I know that's small in the manner of all VR numbers, but it felt like a big accomplishment to me. And since then,
what were you charging for tickets, just to make it commercial?
there was the majority of tickets were free, and then there was 2/3 of the tickets were free, and 1/3 the premium tickets were I think they were $45. So it was a pretty big gulf. Cool. It was like
interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to bring as many people from the community and make it as accessible to people as possible. Because so often the barrier to understanding and playing with this technology is the cost. So I wanted to make sure that if it was something you're enthusiastic about and you were early to the draw, that you could get your free ticket. And then we wanted to make it really valuable to people who paid the money for it. And so they got, you know, a specially designed shirt from one of the artists and priority kind of placement, and they could kind of skip the line. It was like a fast pass. So figuring out that framework was interesting, and in some ways we got it right, in other ways we didn't exactly get it right. It's all learning. Other shows I've done, it'll just be like a flat rate of like $10 or $15, like kind of classic like event cost. What I found is that really what's important is having a big runway to share the message of what you're doing. When you do something on a rush time frame, you think to yourself like, oh, I have all these friends and lots of people that I know would be interested in this, and it's like it hasn't had time to gestate in their mind and like get on. It
takes a while to break through people's consciousness.
Totally.
Even for an audience that you know would be receptive, you know, people live such a busy life. You like especially when you're doing product. Whether it's an event, a show, or like the product you just showed us, or something like Kaleidoscope, where to you it's like the most important thing in the world. You're thinking about it all the time, and then you realize like, oh, no one really gives a shit. This is like such a tiny little part of their awareness, and it's humbling. But I think it's always important to keep that front and center in your mind, because you need to. It makes you focus on delivering real value then.
Totally.
You know, how do I, you know, what do I really want to focus on to solve an urgent problem, or to deliver a, you know, remarkable, delightful experience? Because that's the bar that you have to hit. So you've done a number of other shows afterwards. Is this like, where do you, and maybe this is a transition into like talking a little bit more about what you're doing now and where you see the industry headed. So as a journalist, as someone who's curating these art programs, as someone who's got a startup that's brewing on the back burner right now, I mean, you've worn a lot of different hats. And now you're at a university in New Hampshire. So like, what are you working on next? What are you excited about next? And how do you see this industry playing out over the next 12 months?
So all of it's kind of summed up in the convergence of arts and technologies to me right now. So the work at SNU, Southern New Hampshire University abbreviates to SNHU, and people call it SNU, is really fascinating to me because what we're exploring is what's the world of work and learning in 2030. So that obviously deeply includes immersive technology, but it also includes a lot of other things that are either other emerging technologies or just like other ideas in the jet stream that aren't necessarily embodied in the technology, but will play out in how we kind of evolve. And so there's that over there. And then on the art side, I've started actually curating a broader swath of technologically driven art. And so I've gotten into the more kind of just broad category of new media. I'll have some news that I can't share yet for 2020, but I'll be a curatorial advisor on what'll probably be the biggest public art project in LA in 2020.
Cool.
So I'm really, really excited about that. And that's because it's a unique place to display work, which comes with unique challenges. So that's really what I've been kind of heads down with, is like working with different people to figure out how do we do this? Like, what is this? How is this going to work? But that's a really fruitful and resonant place for me to play with, because artists, it's funny, I actually had a conversation earlier. I'm doing a story on this company called Paperspace, which if you saw the Bill Hader, Tom Cruise deepfake video, or if anybody saw that.
I did. It's crazy. I mean, all that stuff is so terrifying.
I know. Well, the funny thing is, so if there's been a few, and then there was the Ron Swanson Full House kind of mashup, deepfake mashup. Those I noticed that both at the end had an ad for this company called Paperspace, and I was like, who the hell is Paperspace? And it's an AI cloud company that's kind of trying to streamline like AI GPUs and use deep learning to. There are people that come from VFX, so it's this really interesting thing. In talking to them, without kind of, there's parts I can sort of share, they really see the potential of these creative technologies as the reason that they're going to artists for this marketing campaign is that they really identify that artists are the people that come in, and as soon as they can kind of grok what a thing is, they figure out how they can break it better.
Yeah.
Like technologists are usually trying to like hone in on this one problem or hone in on this one solve, and that's really what they're good at. And what artists are good at doing is coming in and saying like, I wonder if you could do this that is not at all how you want me to use this, but in so doing, I unlock a bunch of things that then you can then build on and iterate on. So the 2030 work with SNU, and then working with these artists who kind of by default use technologies to break them open and see what they reveal. That's I'd say that the play space that I'm in right now is and VR and AR are big vehicles for that, because in so many ways VR and AR are the sensory apparatus of the future. Like they're how we're going to engage with these new technologies and new forms and new media.
That's a good play space to be in.
I don't mind it.
So you want to do some tea leaf reading? What do you think? Like, how far away are we from consumer adoption? Let's get back to like the big question in VR AR. Are you like a 5 years out, 10 years out, 2 years out?
It's funny.
When is it going to go mainstream? When are we going to have the real iPhone moment?
Yeah, the true iPhone moment. I think if I had to kind of track that metaphor, I'd say that we're in the like early BlackBerry moment. Like we have some good, like the Quest is some good ideas, but we're going to look back and think that the Quest is quaint in a very short period of time. In terms of truly mainstream VR, the number that I've had in my head for a long time, that is part driven by research and covering the space, and part just driven like because things just kind of descended to your head and you don't know why, is 2024. That has been really where I've been thinking about mainstream VR. I think mainstream AR has already happened, and now we have to develop like a culture and a reason around it, in absence of, like, in some sense AR is both ahead and way behind VR, because there's all these leaks about the Apple AR headset, and the compute is gonna be on the phone, and it'll be like a pair of glasses, which is effectively what the Snap spectacles are, which in that sense makes them the best in terms of reach, but they really can't do much compared to what Magic Leap and HoloLens can do. And meanwhile, the field of view is so bad on both of those headsets that you have to really kind of orchestrate what they are. They can't be true mixed reality yet.
Yeah, so they're not a thing you wear to the coffee shop. No. They're like purpose, devices, either for weird art shit or, maybe some industry purpose. But other than that, they're not, they're so far from a consumer device. It's not even funny. But yeah, AR is sort of there. I mean, but it's for storytelling, it's so challenging though. I mean, the VR is great because as a storyteller, you're like, I want all of your attention. I don't want you to spend any attention on anyone else. Give it to me.
It's like the Genghis Khan.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Genghis Khan of storytelling. There will be no one but me left telling you a story. But AR is such a challenge. It's such a challenge because you have so little control. I mean, golly, it's but you have that reach, you have that adoption, and I think it'll definitely be a thing that it already is a much bigger thing than VR in terms of number of people engaging with it. Okay, so 2024 is the year. That's when it goes big. That's when it gets mainstream.
I don't think there's going to be any more hockey stick moments for VR the way that there have been, where it's like, whoop, whoop. I think what it'll be now is sort of incremental steps that sometimes are steeper than others. Like sometimes it'll look more like a plateau, and like sometimes it'll look kind of like this, and other times it'll look more like this. Where I think just the culture is going to be growing and growing and growing. There's going to be more and more movies and TV that kind of deal with it peripherally, rather than like Ready Player One. It's a movie about VR. It's more like, you see somebody in the background playing VR, or like you see somebody with a use case. And I think it'll just kind of grow incrementally, but by big increments. I think the creator communities that are popping up, like around Beat Saber, and I think the early numbers of quests that we know are really
pretty
wonderful. And so I think that we'll just keep seeing that grow. And as there's more and more content, more and more UGC communities, I think I could see that in the next 4 to 5 years really kind of crystallizing into something
that's quite large.
Takes note of.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good. That feels right. It feels somewhere around there. I think don't think it's going to be in the next year, but no. I think in a way it's already. I think this Christmas holiday is going to be really interesting. There's a lot of content that's going to come out over the next handful of months. More normals are going to be getting the Quest. I think, are we going to be able to see some other breakout titles besides Beat Saber? And, what does that start to look like once you have 3 or 4 things that people are really, really going deep on? I mean, there are other things other than Beat Saber for sure already. Like the community of people in Tilt Brush, Quill, the stuff they're doing is amazing. And you can't do it in anything else. I mean, it really is a substantively different experience that anybody that's in illustration or animation or any of those fields that you're like, oh, fuck, I can a whole department has just been collapsed into me. So there's definitely real use cases that are pretty killer right now. So I don't know. I think there's for me, it would be, I think the industry is already here in some way. It's not mainstream, obviously, but I think there's a real industry now, whereas it's always been based in sort of these weird hypothetical, it's gonna come. But there's people using it right now. You can make a thing and you can go make money on that thing right now. It's hard, but the people that figure it out right now are going to be really well positioned when 2024 rolls around.
Yes. Yeah.
So don't give up, y'all.
Stay in it. I mean, we're in the very beginning of the new chapter.
Yeah. So I like that.
It'll be a long chapter.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for Jesse on the line? Now is the time to ask them. I have asked all of my super obvious questions. So give him something deep and probing to leave us on a good note. Don't be shy. And I'll think of one last question. I would like to know, how much time do you spend in VR? That's what I want to know. No bullshit. How often do you put a headset on?
It really comes in waves. When I'm traveling a lot, to be honest with you, well, now this will be an interesting moment because this will be the first time that I'm going through like a meaningful travel cycle with a Quest. I've actually traveled when I had to do show, because the other thing I do is I do the Tech Talk, which is a talk show in social VR in Altspace. And there were times during the first season when I was, traveling, but my show was going to run at the time that it was set to run at.
Oh, there you're back.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you said it comes in waves and then you disappeared.
Oh, that was the hack. I was like, oh, you'll never know. Basically what I was saying is I think I'm going to answer that pre-Quest and post-Quest. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
So generally speaking, if I'm just like at home doing my own thing on a given non-travel time, I would say I spend an hour every other day in VR, most of which is in Beat Saber. I've gotten really, really good at Beat Saber, but I also I'll go in and play with new kind of tilt brush features just to kind of know what's up. That's not my skill set, so I just go play. And to be honest with you, the other main use case I use it for right now is Netflix. I really like watching Netflix in VR.
So do you, someone told me about, I was complaining on social media. I was like, there needs to be more experiences that are designed for laying down. And I was complaining. I was like, oh man, Netflix doesn't even let you lay down and watch the screen. But then someone mentioned, there's like a weird setting thing where you can flip it and put the screen on the ceiling. Do you watch it laying down in your bed, or do you watch it? Okay. Because it seems like the only real advantage to watching Netflix in VR, and from my perspective, is like, I can put the screen on the ceiling now. That's why I always want to watch TV.
Yeah, there's like I forget what it's called. I think it's just called void mode or something, where you basically just go in and you can put it wherever you want. The other advantage I'd say is that it's you can make it really big. So I actually find I have a different viewing experience of 2D content in VR than I do in on my computer, because it's way bigger. Yeah. So I actually see different details differently. But I don't watch it for long stretches of time. It's more like, when the Invader Zim movie came out the other day, I was like, I gotta watch that in VR. I want to see all those colors and all those details in VR. So
that's cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing your honest usage. For me, it's Beat Saber, it's virtual reality, it's Fuji. Those are the ones that I've been spending most of my time in since I got the Quest. Some tilt brush every now and then, and then it'll sort of just be Super Hot. So good. Oh yeah, I've gone back. I really love Super Hot. I wish they would do the climb for Quest. That would be so dope. That experience is still one of the best. But I mean, there needs to be more titles. I mean, that's the big thing we haven't talked about with the Quest is that how restrictive they're being for artists to post to it. I get that strategy, but they need to chill it out a little bit. Anyways, anybody else have a question? What is the average production cost for 5-minute experience? VR paper napkin, it's like $10,000 a minute, so average cost for 5 minutes would be maybe 50,000, give or take many numbers. But that would be the average.
The low end.
All right. Any other questions? I'm going to say goodbye to you, Jesse.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
It has. I mean, I do these things just because I like doing regular catch-up meetings with my buds anyways. And now I was like, these conversations are often really interesting. Why don't I just open it up? So I'm glad that everyone on the line could join me as I hung out with Jesse and keep doing the Lord's work. I'm really excited about the thing you're doing in 2020. Drop me a line as soon as you can talk freely about it. And then that other thing, my buddy, Ross, we need to follow up about that at some point.
Yes.
So drop me a line maybe after this if you're interested in doing that, because there's movements in his case I think you'd be interested to know about. That was all super cryptic for everyone on the line, but anyways.
And it's actually way crazier than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you again for being generous with your time, and we'll see everyone on the line on Thursday, I guess. Or what's today's? Today's Wednesday. No, Friday. We'll see you on Friday. All right. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Renee.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.